Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Maverick Musings podcast, hosted by me, Rick. Now, before I start talking about this week's episode, you may have noticed something a bit different already. I've had a bit of feedback. It was about the intro music from the previous episodes, which I did make myself, as you could probably tell, as I'm not really a musician. And the listener who gave me the feedback let me know that the music was a little bit depressing. So I've tried my best and made a new intro, which you've just heard, and hopefully it's a little bit better. But if you can let me know by leaving a comment below what you think of the new intro, if you think that it is a bit better, if the old one was better, or that I should, stop being a tight arse and dip my hand in my very shallow pocket and pay someone professional to make me some intro music, I'd love to know what you think. Anyway, on to the subject of this week's episode, which I've called All Aboard the Fun Bus. This one is all about my comedy heroes, and this one was suggested by another listener, so a big thank you to Mandy, who I've known for a long time, and she seems to enjoy the podcast, and she gave me the idea of doing this as a subject, so I've decided to do it as this week's episode. Now, this isn't a list of people in the comedy world in rank of order. It's just a few either individuals or groups of people in a list format of who I like in the world of comedy and who have impacted my life in, I'd say, a positive way. And maybe made my life a bit better and along the way through just enjoyment, laughter, making me feel good. Which is a rare thing in the world. If someone can make you laugh and it making an impact in your life, even if it's just for half an hour or an hour. Now, I know that comedy is subjective and something that I like or what I enjoy. You might not, but again, this podcast this week is all my personal opinion, my preferences. So, with all that out of the way, let's dive in, shall we? So I'm going to start with who I consider to be the greatest double act of all time, and that is Morecambe and Wise. Now, for me, Morecambe and Wise are the ultimate double act because they bounce off each other so well. Everything they do, even though it's been rehearsed, been scripted, it just comes natural to them. It seems off the cuff. It seems like they're just telling you this comedy, and they give off a warmth of they're letting you in. You are part of it. This is for you. And it was all good, clean fun. Now, a little bit of history of Morecambe and Wise. They actually started out as child stars or child performers in the days of music hall. And they weren't a double act originally. Ernie Wise being from down south, Eric Morecambe being from Morecambe, up in the north. And it's only through meeting in the music hall days, Ernie Wise needed a room in digs and didn't have anywhere to stay. Eric Morecambe's mum said that he could stay with them. Eric's mum was Eric's chaperone and then became Ernie's chaperone. Then after a while of seeing how they were together, how they acted, how they made each other laugh, she decided to say to them, why don't you two do a double act? Which they eventually did, and the rest is history. But in the early days, Eric was the straight man and Ernie was the funny one. And then after a while, the roles reversed, and that's the Morecambe and Wise that we know today. So, a few of my favourite sketches they ever did in their shows was obviously the Andre Previn one, or Andrew Preview as they called him, and the orchestra, Eric playing the Krug piano concerto, doing the piano solo and playing all the right notes but not necessarily in the right order. The Singing in the Rain sketch, where they're doing a scene from the film with the same name. Ernie is playing the Gene Kelly character, where he's singing in the rain with the umbrella, and Eric is a policeman on the street who is noticing that it isn't raining because it's in a studio, and obviously it doesn't rain indoors, so he keeps sticking his hand out into the street, and then seeing it's not raining, but yet Eric is the one who's getting wet through different circumstances, where someone's chucking water out of a bucket from a window, him standing under a pipe that then just starts leaking, which is quite funny, quite a good take on it, which they did show to Gene Kelly and he thought was hilarious. But also the Mastermind sketch that they did, which we had Eric as a professor who knew everything there was to know, got everything right, even answered questions before they'd even finished being asked. And then you get Eric, who doesn't really know a lot, tries his best, and he gets points on technicalities and ends up winning by 1 point on the only question that he passes on because the answer happens to be pass. And it's just good clean fun wordplay, just smooth silkiness. It's you couldn't go wrong. It's one of those where you can just sit and watch with anybody. You could watch it with your kids, with your parents, your grandparents, and all of you would laugh. It was fun for all the family, and everyone would enjoy it, and everyone would enjoy their own different bits. And you felt like you were part of that world because Eric would look into the camera and start smiling at it, acting like he was just a person on the street who spotted a camera going, "Look, I'm on TV. Can you believe it? I'm on TV. Look." And then eventually in the middle of the sketch, the rest of the cast, or him and Ernie and the guest star, would just stand there just looking at the camera for about 10 seconds, smiling, just stopping what they were doing. But in a way, it humanised them. It made them feel like you knew them, and I think that was part of the magic that they had. They famously shared a bed in sketches, something at the time only Laurel and Hardy did as men, and they didn't want to do it at first until the writer Eddie Braben said, "If it's good enough for Laurel and Hardy, it's good enough for you." And they were like, "Right, then we'll do it." And when you saw it, it didn't feel weird. It didn't feel like, what are they doing this for? Because those were the days before that sort of thing was, you didn't really question a lot of things back in the 70s. In terms of that thing, you thought they lived together in the same house. You thought that's how the sleeping arrangements would be, and it was fine. Nobody questioned it. There was no backlash about it. Not like if it was today, there'd have to be so many things gone over to make sure it wasn't insensitive or didn't take the piss out of this or that. But it was good family fun. It was never sexualised. It was never anything like that. It was just two blokes sitting in a bed reading, one reading the Dandy, one reading the Financial Times. And with the guest stars they had as well, because they had that draw, they had some amazing viewing figures at the time. Like 20 million people in the UK would sit and watch their show every week. So they could get Oscar winners, they could get leading actors, leading musicians like Elton John, and who else would they be able to get? Well, they got Andrew Previn, they got I think they tried getting Laurence Olivier, but he was only on a video. Yeah, Peter Cushing, who famously they didn't pay from the first episode, and he kept popping up asking for his money in different episodes. And they all wanted to be part of that fun. They all wanted to do something that wasn't in their comfort zone. But as well, like making the guests laugh, like Tom Jones, one of my favourite Morecambe and Wise moments, where there is backing singers while he's singing a song, and all they say is yeah, yeah, yeah. But how they do it and the dancing they do behind him, he's singing live and you can hear him laughing while he's singing and trying to carry on. It's like, even though it's been rehearsed umpteen times, they were sticklers for rehearsal, so that it was polished, but they knew they could ad-lib, they knew what they could do, and everything just felt natural. It still cracked the guests up because it was Morecambe and Wise doing it. And even like Cliff Richard was on there, and he was doing a song and dance routine. He goes into the flat to meet Kerrit and Ernie. Ernie's there painting a airfix model of a Lancaster bomber, and he says, "Oh, Cliff, this is the song we're going to do the dance to," and it starts playing Living Doll, and Eric just shouts, "Turn that rubbish off," and turns to Cliff Richard and says, "I can't stand that fella," and it's his song that's playing. It's like, that's the sort of thing they could do, and the guest stars loved it. And as well, of course, the legendary banter that they had with Des O'Connor, where they would forever take the piss out of him on the show, take the piss out of his singing, call him Desperate O'Connor, or saying, if you want to advertise with Des, put adverts on the soles of his shoes, because he'd usually faint. And it's that sort of banter that you have with your mates, because they were mates. And you felt that. You felt it wasn't bad-natured. It wasn't, we're just taking the piss out of you because we can. It was friends having a laugh with each other. And I think that's what brought them more to the country's heart, because you felt like you were part of it and that you could enjoy it as much as they were. And moving on to my second comedy hero, which is the comedian Lee Evans. I mean, he's a brilliant stand-up comedian. He has unlimited energy on stage. It's like the man sweats about 5 gallons a show, and you wonder how he just doesn't end up being dehydrated after like 5 minutes, because he just, as soon as he gets on that stage, he's just like a waterfall of sweat. But he makes things, that his movement is the way he says things, or he can make something mundane seem hilarious just by the way he does it. And he had a mastery of his craft of saying to his audience something really dull. Like for me, the first time I watched one of his shows, I was on holiday in Gran Canaria, and I was up late at night, and he happened to be on the TV, and I had to put a pillow over my mouth from laughing so loud, because I would have woken everyone else up who was on holiday with in my family. And it's something that I've not forgotten, because it is that funny. And it was about bump starting the car with your wife, and the absurdity of you thinking that she knows what you're talking about when she hasn't got a clue, when you're using terms that you don't expect people not to know. It's like just shouting, you're there pushing the car and just shouting "now," and she doesn't understand what "now" means. Or talking about how technology moves on and you end up stuck with a load of things that are out of date that nobody wants anymore, such as VHS tapes or records and things like that. It's like how technology passes you by, and yet you still feel like it's worth something. But his film library as well that he's been in. He's not been in many, but he's been in a few notable ones, such as There's Something About Mary, where he played a character called Tucker, and just his physical comedy of playing a pizza delivery boy who, well, it turns out he's a pizza delivery boy. You first meet him as an architect on crutches who struggles to walk properly. And there's one scene where he drops his keys in Cameron Diaz's character Mary's office, and she offers to help him, and he's like, no, I've got to learn to do it myself. And just the way he's trying to move to pick up these keys off the floor from a standing position on 2 crutches is absolutely hilarious. And it's something that gets often overlooked with him, is just his physical comedy. He did film, he did TV, but his TV series never really took off in the way that the people probably thought it should. And I think TV, sitcom-wise, wasn't ready for him, or he wasn't ready for it. And so he mainly stuck with stand-up and the odd film, but nothing really past, say, the late 90s in film terms. But again, he's one of those where I can stick a DVD on and just have an absolute ball watching him. I mean, he's that funny just by looking at him. One of my friends, they saw the DVD cover of him and then the menu screen. I spent 5 minutes laughing at a still image of him on the menu screen because apparently it was just that funny. And it's just him pointing at the camera that he's looking at. But they spent 5 minutes laughing at it. So moving on to number 3, and this pick is the big yin himself, Sir Billy Connolly. I mean, he is the ultimate stand-up comedian. He influenced so many people in so many different eras. I mean, what can you say about someone who's forever held up as an influence on people? I mean, he can start a story, get lost in that story and move on to something else, and then realise once he's finished that story, he can just jump back into the beginning one and it makes sense, and you're hooked on every single word he says. I mean, he doesn't know what's going to come out of his mouth next. He always said that the worst part of his shows is him trying to get started. He needed to find something to make the show start. It could be something he sees or something he's heard, or he's even looking in the audience at someone's shirt. The first 5 minutes is him trying to get started, but once he starts, bang, straight on. I mean, even Peter Kay says he's seen him on 2 nights in a row, and he's done completely different shows each night, and he couldn't believe how he'd managed to do it. And I think it's because he doesn't write down what he's going to say. It's literally out of his head, out of his mouth, and the audience are falling about laughing because he takes you on that journey with him. That what he describes you can visualise in your head, and it is just funny. I mean, his use of language, he says the best 2 words in the English language is fuck off, because it applies to everything. And he's right. I mean, you can say it in so many different contexts, and it means the same, but different to each situation that you use it in. But also how he describes things and the stories that he tells. He's not really a traditional joke comedian where it's set up, punchline, set up, punchline, set up, punchline. He tells stories, he tells things he's observed, and you can visualise it in your head. Like one time when he said he was on the bus in Glasgow and he saw an old lady waiting to get off the bus at the back door, and the bus wasn't slowing down, and she just jumped off, but her legs were still running, and she was matching the speed of the bus at one point, and then the road forked and she went one way and the bus went the other, and he said, I often wonder where that old lady ended up. Is she still going? And you could just get the image of a little old lady, little old age pensioner trying to keep up with a double-decker bus, and then all of a sudden just disappearing down a road that forks, and she goes one way, and he said, I've never seen her since. So I wonder if she ever stopped. And just the image of that, and you're laughing. And his use of how he says words as well. So in the world of sense and things like that. He was bemused at jojoba. He said, "What the fuck's that?" Jojoba in Scotland, that's the month that comes before November. So what was wrong with soap? Why couldn't we just call it soap? And you're just laughing at just the fact that he's bemused by just one word, but it's how he says it. And you're just laughing at this man just telling just a word. But as well, with how he just holds an audience, a classic example is when ITV gave him his own An Audience With show, which at the time was a huge accolade. It was basically saying that you'd made it. And he had an audience mixed with big stars in the UK as well as members of the general public. And to go on to be in the audience in them shows, you had to apply for it if you remember the general public, or your agent got it. You were a seat in if you were a celebrity, and whenever the camera cut to that audience, you could see people crying with laughter, no matter who they were, no matter what their status. Everyone was the same. They were in fits of laughter at this one man telling stories. Like a story he said about incontinence pants, where you can just imagine a young lad with incontinence. It's like going out to a disco, trying to pull, and he's not caring because he's got the trendy baggy pants on, so it doesn't show that he's wearing these incontinence pants. And just through the night, he's just pissing down his leg, and he pulls at the end of the night. And he's like, I'll take you home in a minute. I've just got to empty my underwear. He's got 8 gallons down each leg, and he's trying his best to walk to the bathroom to empty his pants. And everyone's just in fits of laughter at this, because it's just the sight and just the sound of what he's conveying, and it's just absolutely hilarious. And again, it just comes from nowhere. And even in his films, he's done straight acting. He's been very good at it, but also comedic acting, and he's very good at that as well. He's a very underrated actor in terms of straight acting. But he says he says about his own acting that you can tell what people think of his acting because he's the only person to die in a Muppet movie. Which is true. He was in the Muppets Treasure Island. He was in the first, I think, 10-15 minutes of that film, and he gets killed off. He is the only person that gets killed in a Muppet movie. Whereas I don't know if that's an indictment of his skills or not, but it's a claim to fame that I don't think anyone's gonna have. But with Billy as he is, he's a national treasure, and I'm just glad that even with his declining health, that he gets to see the joy he brings to people of so many different generations, because he will always be discovered. He's a comedian that he's never going to be dated, because he doesn't really tell things that about certain people at certain times. So it's not about a joke about a prime minister that no one will ever hear of in about 20 years. It's just observations that you could make yourself. Another classic example of this is he said, I never did well at school. I got A-level guilt, but he's on record as saying, "Why should I learn algebra? I've no intention of ever going there." As a child, thinking that algebra was a country and he'd have to learn a new language. But he's a one-off. Is Billy as a storytelling comedian, an observational comedian. He's one of a kind, and I don't think we'll ever see one like him again. The next pick number 4 in the list of my comedy heroes, is a bit different. It's a comedy filmmaker, and if you haven't guessed it by now, just by that description, it is the one and only Mel Brooks. He, for me, is an absolute master of what he does in terms of filmmaking, comedy filmmaking. But he makes comedy films sort of serious. He sets them up as serious, but there's comedy in them. So it looks like a big budget film, but it's a comedy film. So, such as Robin Hood, Men in Tights, Young Frankenstein, Silent Movie, The Producers, Spaceballs, Blazing Saddles, the list goes on. And each film is absolutely brilliant. I mean, Robin Hood, Men in Tights could be the best Robin Hood film ever made. And it was a parody of Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And it's not shy about saying it. It's got Cary Elwes, when questioned why people should listen to him as Robin Hood in the film, he says, unlike other Robin Hoods, I can speak with an English accent. And it's like, oh, they're taking the piss out of Kevin Costner, because he just did it in an American accent, like he just got off the plane. And the sword fighting, it was very Errol Flynn Robin Hood-esque. But it was brilliant. There was the Sheriff of Rottingham character as an homage to Alan Rickman as the Sheriff of Nottingham, yet I feel that the character should have been switched because Alan Rickman just was absolutely hilarious in a straight film. But with Maid Marian, the joke of she has a chastity belt, Robin eventually gets the key. Turns out it fits the lock, but it won't turn. So at the end of the film, he's there shouting, "Call a locksmith! Call a locksmith!" The fact that little John can't swim and he thinks he's drowning in about an inch of water, and just things like that. It's a brilliant film, and timeless moments like breaking the fourth wall to read the script as to why he's lost an archery contest. And things like that, or having a sword fight. He goes to stab the Sheriff of Rottingham, and the sword goes through a member of the crew's McDonald's cup. You just see the crew with all the equipment behind the camera, or through a window. And likewise with Young Frankenstein, a collaboration with Gene Wilder. Mel directed it, Gene wrote it. And it was a loving homage to classic monster movies from the 20s and 30s and the early 40s. It's, again, a hilarious film. Just the characters of Dr. Frankenstein instead of Dr. Frankenstein, because he doesn't want to be associated with his ancestors' legacy of reanimating corpses. So he calls himself Frankenstein. You've got Marty Feldman as Igor, who doesn't realise he's got a hump on his back, which keeps moving around. You've got Terry Garr as his assistant. You've got Cloris Leachman as Frau Blucher, and every time her name's mentioned, you just hear horses whinnying in the background, like they're startled, and it's just absolutely hilarious. And the best part of that film for me is the scene where they're singing Putting on the Ritz, Dr. Frankenstein and the monster. And it's a scene that I've seen so many times, I even just have to think about it and I'm laughing, that I will always be crying with laughter at it, because it is just so funny. It's absurd and just funny, and no matter how many times I see it, I will never get bored of it. That is how good the filmmaking and the storytelling of this film is. And again, with another film, Silent Movie, made a genuine silent film, but it had one word of dialogue in it throughout the whole film. And he gave it to, ironically for us, but intentionally, to the world's greatest mime artist, Marcel Marceau, or the world's most famous mime artist. And the word is just no. When he rings him up to say, look, we would like to be in the first silent film that's been made in about 35-40 years. We'd love to have you in it as the world's most famous mime. And you just see him there just going, no! And then that's it. That's the only word spoken in it. And it's funny because you don't expect it from the person who it is. and it makes it all the more better for his reaction. It's like, well, what did he say? And Mel Brooks' character, like, I don't know, I don't speak French. It's just brilliant how he just takes these ideas and puts them into practice, but also while starring in them, directing them, and just making them absolutely brilliant, like Spaceballs as well. The fact he got permission from George Lucas to make it on the one condition that he didn't do any merchandise for it, because that was George Lucas's thing. That's how Star Wars became Star Wars. It was all the merchandising. So Mel Brooks agreed, and then took the piss out of it by putting an advert for merchandise in the middle of the film, which there was no merchandise for. But there's brilliant bits in what could arguably be described as the best Star Wars movie ever made, and ironically not by George Lucas or Disney. Like the heroes getting captured by the bad guys, but only to find out the bad guys only find out that it's the stunt doubles that they've caught. Or John Hurt playing his character from Alien in a canteen, and the chest burster scene happening, and he looks down at his chest and goes, "Oh no, not again," when he sees an alien poking out of it. Or all the crew on the Dark Helmet's ship all seem to have the same last surname, called asshole. I'm surrounded by assholes. Just that sort of thing. It's brilliantly cast, brilliantly written, brilliantly directed, and it is funny. But for me, the best film he made was Blazing Saddles, because it was a homage to westerns. It was a comedy western, but it also was taking the piss out of racism and racists. And at the time, that was bold, because this was 1974 in America, and that was bold. And he did it in a way where it was set in 1874, but they were playing it as if they were in 1974. So the new sheriff of the town is black, and he arrives into town, and nobody knows what he is, what he looks like, who he is, and they're all cheering because he's coming, he's on his way. They've set up a big welcome for him, and they look out on the top of the building. It's got this little telescope, and it says the sheriff's coming, and they're like, "Ray, let's start the music, let's get him ready for him." And every time he's trying to say the sheriff's the N-word, the church bells go off, so they can't hear him. It's like, what's he saying? He's like, "Oh, the sheriff is near." And it's only when he turns up and they see what he looks like, everyone goes quiet, and you could hear a pin drop. And then he starts trying to make an announcement, say that he's the sheriff of the town and he's going to do his best for the town, and you can just see everyone getting the guns out and pointing them at him, ready to shoot him right there and then, to the point where he plays them at their own game, pulls out his own gun, puts it to his neck, and holds himself hostage, and everyone puts the guns away. It's like, oh my god, someone help that poor man. Why is nobody helping him? Because he's putting on two voices and just proving the stupidity of these people, and like racism in general. It's like they're ready to basically bump him off, but when they think someone's going to do it, someone's holding him hostage, they want to help him. And it's clever. It's clever writing, clever filmmaking, and it's a film you can't make today, sadly, because it's a very clever film, but because it uses the N-word a lot, it wouldn't be made today. And it's a film I recommend to everybody who's listening to this to watch it just once, because it's a very good film and it will make you laugh. And there's the scene, probably one of the most famous scenes in the film, is the campfire scene, where a load of cowboys sitting by the campfire, drinking black coffee, eating plates of beans, and then they start farting one by one, like leaning forward, standing up. And this was the first time this happened on a cinema screen in a film. And it seems crazy today, but this was the first time it happened, because Breaking Wind was considered bad taste, not humorous. But Mel Brooks put it on film, and it was absolutely hilarious. But it's even funnier if you watch a TV edit of the movie, where they put different scenes in for different things for the TV audience, for what you can go away with on TV. And they still have that scene in, but they take all the fart sounds out. So you just see this choreographed ballet of blokes just getting up and sitting down, but with no noise whatsoever. And it's somehow still as funny, if not funnier. And finally on this list is my ultimate comedy hero. And that is the man, the myth, the legend, the Rick Mail. Now this was a man whose anarchic style of comedy is a true one-off. And he was all ours. He was all the UK's. He went to Hollywood for a film, Drop Dead Fred, which is a brilliant film but didn't do well. Rick's performance and his style of comedy was highlighted as one of the reasons it didn't do well, because America at the time didn't understand or didn't appreciate his style of humour. And so he came back, and he was like our little comedy treasure. He was just for us. And I think that made it better, because he was ours. We could say, well, we've got this guy, you haven't got him. But if you just look at the body of work that he's done, that he's been a part of, or he's written as well as acted in, so some of the gems are The Young Ones, the comic strip, Kevin Turvey Investigates, Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, Bottom, The New Statesman, Man Down, as well as little recurring roles in Blackadder and Jonathan Creek. Jonathan Creek not really being a comedy, but Rick Mail was funny in them. And each thing he was in, he commanded your performance just by his charisma, his energy, the way he acted, the way he'd perform, the way he'd say things. You were instantly drawn to him. And he was absolutely amazing. I mean, his appearance in Blackadder Series 2 is a classic example of Rick being Rick. He played the character Lord Flashheart, who was going to be Blackadder's best man in his wedding. And during rehearsal, Rick went through the scene as was written on the page, acted like everyone else during rehearsal, and blocking where he was going to stand and saying the lines in the way everyone else was saying theirs. But Rick was a live audience performer. He felt the buzz from the audience. So when the studio audience came in for the recording of the episode, and when the camera started rolling, boom, Rick arrived. And when he burst on that scene, burst through the doors, he instantly took over that scene, because his energy went from everyone else's to 11, to quote Spinal Tap. He just burst on. Everyone was taken aback by it, because that's not how they rehearsed it, and everyone just stood back. You could see them standing back, not knowing what to do, and just watching Rick just be Rick. And he just on the screen for no more than 2 minutes, and he took over that entire episode just by his charisma, the way he said things, the way he looked at the camera, even his fake mustache that was part of his costume was falling off, it seemed right because it was Rick. And the only reason he said he would do that episode is he had all the funniest lines in the entire series to one of the writers, Ben Elton, and he was only in it for no more than 2 minutes, if that. And he's the most memorable character from that episode, and it says a lot about Rick. He could just come in, do his lines, be Rick, and just leave, and that's what you remember. And likewise in Man Down, when he played Greg Davis's dad, he had very little screen time in the entire first series that he was in before he died. I think he only totaled about 10 minutes throughout the first season. But he's the bits that you'd remember. Most of it was improvised, what they did. And Rick just was Rick. He took it to the extreme. He would throw himself over a car bonnet at the age he was to make people laugh, and he was brilliant. And it's a shame he died when he did. I can't believe it's been so long. It's been 10 years since he died, and it only feels like yesterday. But that just is down to the body of his work. I mean, it shows how much of a national treasure he was. Even when he started, he was considered an alternative comedian, which was anti-establishment, anti the Tory government at the time, anti-Thatcher, anti-capitalism, that sort of thing. It was comedy with an agenda, it was labelled as. And for when Rick died, his death was announced on the front page of every national newspaper, including the pro-Tory ones, or the serious newspapers like the Times, the Guardian, that sort of thing. And it was on every major news channel in the UK, and you could tell that the country mourned when he died because it came out of nowhere. He was a national treasure. He was ours, and it was very sad when he died. I felt genuinely sad. I was shocked when it was announced that he died. And it's not a day goes by when we watch a program and you think, oh, Rick could be good in this. But those that pass on, they're never truly gone, as they say, because he's left behind a body of work that you can watch whenever you want, and he's there. The people's poet is there, as he called himself. But he's also the reason I failed the job interview once. Not directly, but just through mentioning him. I won't tell you where the interview was for. But I was asked the question of who are your heroes? You know, those stupid bloody questions that have got nothing to do with the job whatsoever. And I said, well, my hero is Rick Mail. And I got asked why by someone who was younger than me, who looked at me as if I'd said someone completely random who they never heard of. He said, all right, why is that? And I said, well, because he was a genius and he had an attitude of he doesn't give a shit. And I didn't realise I'd sworn in the interview. And I left that interview thinking it had gone really well. Within 30 seconds of me walking out that door, I had a message on my phone to tell me that I had failed the interview. They weren't going to progress. Well, they weren't going to progress with my application after interview because I'd sworn in it. And I'm sure that's something Rick would have approved of in his own way. But now we've come to the end of this week's episode, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me ramble on about some people I find funny and the reasons why. even though for the last few minutes I was talking about Rick Mail's death. As always, please like, share, and subscribe on the platform that you're viewing this on, such as Spotify or YouTube. And also leave a comment down below to let me know who your comedy heroes are, what sort of things you'd like about the people that I've mentioned, or even just to let me know something you'd like to hear in a future episode. I'm always looking for input and feedback, and it'd be greatly appreciated to get to know a bit more of what you'd like to hear. And so that's me done now for another week. And once again, thank you for listening. And as always, I will see you next time.